for student success.
This meeting is being recorded.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you for joining us in the second of our series for the 2023 Teaching Week, and I welcome you on behalf of CETL. We have a very interactive session planned for you today, and we certainly recognize that we have different participants from different campuses. And so I want to invite you to continue letting us know in the chat where you're joining us from. And today the session is now being recorded, so we will be able to see all the items you put in the chat. And there are no emergencies planned. If something happens and we lose power, we will have to redo this event or reschedule this event. I'm Leroy Hill, and I'll be your host and facilitator for the next hour and a half, close to 2. And I certainly want to say good afternoon to all my colleagues who are joining from CETL. So in the chat room, we do have Dr. Zephyrin. You're going to hear from him in a while, and we're going to promote the other activities of Teaching Week. We have Dr. Julia Jones. We have Mr. Mark Garcia, Mr. Javed Mohammed, Mr. Randy Duku. So that's the CETL team that's making sure that all our production and everything goes smooth for this afternoon. Special good afternoon from all those who are joining us from Jamaica, from our sister campus, those who are joining us from our sister campus, Cave Hill, and our sister campus, Open Campus. And so we're certainly happy to have you. I'm going to pause for a moment and invite, I want you to get an idea of some of the things that we are going to be doing for Teaching Week. And I'm going to invite Dr. Zephyrin. Dr. Zephyrin, if you can share just for a moment, let us know some of the activities we have planned for Teaching Week this year. Your audio is off. We're not hearing you. Okay, so while we're waiting, you can see from the screen there that we have a number of activities. Yesterday we had a panel session. Today we have the session assessments, but we do want you to, as partners, help in the promotion of the Mastering Multiple Choice Question and Coping with Anxiety. These are 2 student-led sessions. Are you ready, Justin?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Oh, great, great. Thank you so much for that, Dr. Hill. So the Faculty and Professional Development Teaching and Learning Week is a series of events we have throughout this entire week. We had our very impactful and insightful panel discussion yesterday, 21st Century Assessment at Higher Education, and of course, today's session, Alternative Assessments for Student Success. So what we did, the rationale behind it, we tried to take two-dimensional approach to this. We wanted to address some of the concerns that faculty encountered with regard to assessments in higher education, and then take it also from the angle of the students. So tomorrow's session, Mastering Multiple Choice Questions, a webinar for students that is targeted for students, as well as Coping with Assessment Anxiety, a webinar for students. That's on Thursday. Both sessions begin at 1:30 p.m. And those sessions are targeted to students. So I'm going to ask Mr. Mohammed or Mr. Garcia to upload the registration links for those sessions, which you can share with your students so they can register and thereafter get the link to attend and really benefit from it. Because, I mean, yes, we're coming down to the end of the midterm assessment season and going straight in the end of term assessment season. So these are sessions that would be beneficial to them at this point in time. All right, so we wanted to take a more holistic, data-driven approach with regard to assessments at the University of the West Indies and other sister campuses. Dr. Hill?
Thank you, Dr. Zephyrin. Appreciate that. And so we'll go straight to our session. If you can unshare your document, Justin, so I could.
You can just go ahead and share. It should bump me off.
No, you. Thank you. Thank you for that. All right. So today we want to really bring the idea of alternative student alternative assessments for student success. The focus here is really on the student success. And so before we begin, I want to really break a little ice. I know there are 18 of us here. And so I want to invite you in a very meaningful way, if you can see my screen, to take part in this lyrical tempo, all right? So we want to see how, I know many of us here are creative. You want to see how you can use the first letter of your name. We'll make a very short 2 minutes for this activity to introduce your academic interest or something about you. Tell us something about you. And or you may also include what you aim to get from this session. What you aim to get from this session. So, for example, you will notice in mine, it says here that let Leroy list lots of lovely limited ways you can assess learners. That's mine. So I've already done mine. Sorry that I redo it. So in the chat room, I want you to just use the first letters of your name to introduce your academic interest or something about you or what do you want to get. Try to repeat words from the first letter of your name at least 4 times in sequence. All right. I know this is going to take a little time for you to think, so I'm going to give you the time for that to sink in and for those to come in the chat. So I'm expecting you to do that in the chat. I don't know, can you do that in the chat room? Please do that in the chat room. I'm not seeing, but I know that you guys are thinking, you're thinking this through. Leroy is giving you the lyrical latitude to do that, you know. So go ahead and do that, please. Seeing some coming in, they're coming in. All right. All right, great. Simon is our first one. Thank you, Simon. Oh yes, Simon shares so much about information security and systems. Thank you, Simon. Thank you for that. I see we also have Cadiz. Cadiz is saying, Cadiz cares, country classmates are welcome to connect. Cadiz also loves case studies and creative exams and assignments. This is great. This is great, Cadiz. I really love to see how you're doing this lyrical tempo. I see also Lynette likes learning and leading students to historical knowledge. So I get an idea that this is someone from the School of Education and Humanities. Thank you, Lynette. I see Steve. Steve is saying, Steve seeks surety ways to secure successful assessment strategies to ensure success for all stakeholders. Wow, this is a good one, I must say. Steve, that's a good one. That's a good one. Any others? Let's keep them going. I know. Cadiz is clapping you. Thank you, Cadiz. This is really great. Let's get the creative juice going. We know many of you are creative educators here in this lyrical tempo. All right, we'll pause for now, but feel free while we're going through the presentation for you to do that. All right, we're going to continue now. Andrea always appreciates, I like that, always appreciates academic activities for adeptness and awareness for aiming at augmented assistance of students. Whoa! I am so happy that we are able to be so creative. And Cadiz again is also recognizing you. So again, colleagues, today we're going to do 4 things. We want to be able to differentiate between the traditional, the alternative. We want to be able to look at what do we mean by alternative and authentic assessment and approaches. When I look at those approaches, we want to describe the characteristics of what makes authentic assessment so unique. And we have the third thing is that we want to really deepen our appreciation for assessment practices that support student success. And we'll get an opportunity to do some through groups to really design an appropriate assessment activity. All right, so we'll certainly do that. All right. I'll just take some time to highlight some persons who just came in. We notice Dr. Zephyrin. Justin is just, jovial, and justified in fixing jams in teaching and learning. That's a good one, Justin. That's a very good one. And Petri is saying, Power Battery, participates in assessment strategies for the progress of student nurses. Oh, good. We have someone from the Faculty of Medical. So thank you so much. I think we certainly saw a range of persons participating in this activity. Now, we want to start with an idea of reflection. Reflection plays an important part in our teaching and learning. And so we certainly want to start with that. And I want to invite you at this time. This is an open mic. I want you to share how you're thinking. Share how your thinking and practice on assessment has changed. And we'll look 2 years. Let's see 2 years over the last 2 years. And I'm going to invite you. I'm inviting my colleagues to post that link in the chat of that Google document. I'll put it in the chat. So we can certainly see that. Okay. Give me a second. All right, so it's in the chat. So you're going to open that link and you're going to share how your assessment thinking has changed. I'm seeing some persons have already come in. Yeah, some persons, I'm waiting until I'm going to share my screen in a while, but I'm seeing some persons have already come in already. So that's great. I'm seeing here that we have one person is anonymous. Person saying, I found myself becoming. Please ignore. It's anonymous, so no one will know it's you. Okay. How has your assessment changed? In case you missed that link. Creative, excellent. One person has become creative here. Anonymous Mink, lost some faith in technology-mediated learning. Is that so? Mediated assessment. Okay, good, nice. I am spending more time preparing. Ah, great. I found myself questioning the nature of assessment. Wow, this one is deep and wide. That one is deep and wide. I really love that one. Okay, we have like 23 persons here. So if you can follow the link and participate, that makes it more interactive. It makes it more meaningful. I would never have thought using technology, someone is saying, for the assessment of a course. All right, Grace. It has been challenging to convert the practical assessment to online assessment. I have appreciated more limitations of technology-assisted assessment, at least those available at the UWI. All right. And so we see here that making assessments more meaningful and unnecessarily stressful. That's a good one. Unnecessarily less stressful. That's an interesting one. Okay, how has your thoughts on assessment changed over the last 2 years? We see some of those coming here. Okay, I think the physical separation of isolation increased the need for feedback. I love that one. I love that one. I really love that one. The need for feedback. I was challenged to develop assessment, and see that person is still typing. All right. So we are seeing here that many of you are able to really take that step back and pause in a very meaningful way on what it means, what are some of the challenges that occur. We saw quite a number of challenges, a number of opportunities being explored. Your ideas on assessment has not remained the same. So you're no longer the same person you were 2 years ago. And I suspect part of the reason why you're here is because we really want to engage in that little dialogue about assessment and in particular focusing on student success. And so we want to look at some assumptions, and these assumptions are taken as prerequisites. So because we are not necessarily focusing on assessments per se, so we really have the idea that some of these assumptions that we are holding to, these become like prerequisites for the session, because we're not going to focus on the session. We really want to focus on student success and alternative assessments. But one of the things we want to hold dear to is the whole relationship between measurement, assessment, and evaluation. We can't ignore that. We definitely can't ignore the relationship between those three. The relationship or characteristics of effective feedback. We hold it dearly that feedback should be timely, it should be goal-oriented, it should really encourage self-assessment. And so there are different ways in which we can see how assessment is used. Asking probing questions. So we know that. I mean, we're not focusing on that. We're assuming that this is a prerequisite to come in to this session. One of the prerequisite that we also look at is the whole notion of what does good assessment and feedback look like. And there are some that presented here that we know that good assessment helps students to clarify what good performance is. What are the goals, whether they are targeting the criteria, whether they are meeting the standards. Good assessment also encourage time and effort on challenging learning tasks. We also know that good assessments and feedback, it really helps them to be reflective, to be metacognitive about what they're doing. So it encourages them to really take that step back and think about how they're learning their whole learning process. And so we do know that. It encourages, there is also the need for us to encourage interaction and dialogue around the learning experience. So we know that that's something that's recognized. And we do know that one of the good practices is that they give learners a choice in assessment in content and processes. We should also involve the students in our decision making about assessments. And definitely we know it helps to teach us to adapt the teaching to student needs. Notice I'm not focusing on learning styles, all right? I don't support learning styles theory, and I'll use every opportunity I get to really focus that, because it's a myth. It's a myth. I don't know if anyone in the chat would agree or disagree, but it's a myth. And I want to say one of the assumptions of prerequisites is the whole idea of modes of assessment, and the research is clear that there is more student-centered approaches towards assessment, and therefore the more formative approach of assessment, that is assessment that takes place during learning, is perhaps the preferred method. And I know that someone mentioned about making assessment less stressful. So, and they recognize you're spending more time, because now you're recognizing the formative assessment component is really time consuming. And so is that relationship between the various modes of assessment. We recognize that that is certainly something that we hold dearly to. So we're not focusing on those, but we recognize that this is a prerequisite we want you to come with this. And I think what I want to perhaps look at is the relationship between instruction and assessment. And when we look at that relationship, we can focus on a number of things. We can focus on a number of things here. And we know that instruction and assessment are most effective when we look at, for example, directed towards learning-defined intended learning outcomes. And obviously, the assessment will be assessing those learning outcomes. the methods and materials that you use are congruent with the outcomes to be achieved. In other words, there's an alignment. And we know that we follow it from Biggs' triangulation method, where you look at the assessment, instruction, and the learning activities. All right. And so it's important for us to see here that there is a connection. In fact, I like how Mountain and his colleagues say here that assessment as teaching. In other words, we should see assessment as an integral, continuous part of the teaching and learning process, and not necessarily segmented or usually compartmentalized, usually episodic, usually at midterm or end of term. That it should be a more or less assessment as teaching and learning, recognize the relationship. So I'm going to ask someone, after reading this, take some time reading this and let me know in the chat what you think about this. After you read this, what do you think about this? Another approach to acknowledge the symbiotic relationship between assessment and teaching and learning. From this perspective, assessment is not just a discrete activity conducted at the end of the period of teaching and learning and designed to check how well new materials has been understood. Rather, assessment is part of the ongoing process of teaching and learning. All right, we see that there, embodied in a network of consideration of a person's skills, knowledge, reflection, and the things that they understood, and areas for improvement. We use feedback to identify areas for practice, for further exploration, and monitoring progress. In the chat, let's keep it coming. Participation in assessment procedures can be part of the learning experience. Reflecting on that, really think about it. I like what you're saying here, Cadiz, because it really underscores the need for us to do what is called a 1-minute paper. Thank you for that, Cadiz. I really appreciate that. All right. So we do see those in the chat. So like Cadiz, someone is saying, Joanne, we'll resend that link again. Thank you. Not getting through the link, we will send the link, Camille, in a while. So we certainly see that. All right. All right. So anyone else wants to reflect? What does this reading tell you about assessment and teaching? And are there any things that it actually forces you to really rethink in your teaching practice and obviously your planning and so forth? All right. So the click isn't working. We'll resend it in a while. This is a very useful way to think of assessment. However, the involvement of participation of students is difficult to get sometimes when assessment is not graded. Thank you for that, Lynette. And that is quite valid because many students fixated on grades, but it still invites us to think of teaching and learning and as a very important aspect of the I'm seeing here, I want to share this. When we do reflect at the end of the semester only, it benefits the next batch of students, not the ones in front of us. I like that. I really like that. And so certainly we see that that's a very good way, seeing how we can actually use some of those in our teaching and learning. So, can I summarize? Can I summarize? Can I conclude, therefore, that students can escape bad teaching, but they cannot escape bad assessment? I wanted to pause on that, because obviously, the assessment becomes a crucial part of making sense. Assessment is used for different stakes. We are from high stakes exams. And so it becomes important for us to see that relationship and acknowledge this relationship, because we do know bad assessment happens. What does that look like? And it looks differently for different persons. But what are some of the problems that we get with assessment? We want to share. We'll use a open mic now, or you can use the chat. Open mic. Some of the problems we have with assessment. Some of the problems we have with assessment. If you can do that in the open mic, let's open the mic. I want to hear you. I want to hear from you. You can put it in the chat as well. What are some of the problems that we have? All right, Camille, it requires participatory approach as an ongoing exercise throughout the semester. That's one of the challenges. It may not always be equitable. I like that, Camille. I really love that. I really love that. It may not always be equitable. Anyone else? Feel free to hold your mic. I'm going to maybe call. Okay, Candice. Very good. Go ahead, Candice.
I have noticed that with younger students, they seem to suffer from more assessment anxiety, and especially switching to the online environment because they have the ability to send emails. I have one particular student who emails me all the time, every day, several times a day, when she has an assignment to do. And I find that they need more hand-holding in the online environment.
Thank you. And that is so right, because for many of them, the online environment is something different. Although they might be located in different means of the online setting, but in terms of the teaching and learning and supporting them, you are certainly correct in terms of holding their hands. And there is clear research, Candice, to really support the whole idea of having a structure for dialogue, but also having the whole aspect here of learner autonomy. And many of them don't know what that means like. And so I'm bringing in the whole idea of distance education theory from Michael Moores, who is one of the grandfathers of distance education. You really need to increase the level, and you hold your hand, but you eventually let it go, where the learner autonomy becomes really stronger for when it comes to the online setting. So Camille, you're saying, I agree with Candice that students do not get anxiety, and so certainly we see that further support. Anyone else? Anyone else would like to share or use the audio? We need to introduce the student counselors early in the semester. Camille and I saying that she agree. Any others? Let's get the interaction up. Thank you, Camille, for that. I'll highlight that. Thank you. Anyone else? What are some of the problems? What are some of the problems we have with assessments? You mean these are the only problems? I'm saying Lynette is saying anxiety and fear about making mistakes in learning is a major barrier. And so they're afraid to make mistakes that they will not even answer a question. That is, yeah, and that is why, Lynette, we are encouraging you to partner with us. Share the link. Dr. Zephyrin spoke about it, how to take a multiple choice exam that's purely student-led, student focus, sorry. And the other session is on the whole idea of anxiety. So certainly we see that being important. So thank you for that. Thank you for that. I think I see a hand up, Andrea.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, Leroy. I just wanted to make a comment. What we're doing here is excellent, very much needed, and of course will have much benefit. But I'm wondering if this is something that should not be introduced to our educators at earlier levels, primary and secondary school levels and so on, because my feeling is that by the time our young people, our students come to us, they have already been exposed to traditional assessments, to a way of thinking where they just need to do the thing for the grade or the mark, that kind of thing. So that when you introduce additional exercises to where there's no grade necessarily associated or mark associated with the exercise, there isn't a lot of buy-in to that or participation, because they're just so concerned about doing that exercise that has the grade attached to it that they forget, they ignore everything else or would like to ignore everything else. So I'm wondering if we also need to target educators at primary and secondary school to change this way in which we consider assessment, not just for educators, but for our students as well.
Wow. And I think your colleague, Steve, was thinking along your same line. You know, we can't ignore it. So thank you for that comment. It is certainly needed for us to take a little, an earlier prong at this. And we do recognize that those challenges and problems start earlier. And so thank you for that. I really appreciate that. I really appreciate that. Any additional problems that we see? And I really like the comment said here by Steve, which is on the screen. You can see that. All right, and certainly we recognize that there are many problems with assessment. I'm highlighting a few of them here. We see here that many times, assessments do not match the learning outcomes. That's a common one. That's a common one. So assessment tasks do not match the stated learning outcomes. The criteria do not match the task. The criteria are not yet not known to the students. They do not understand the criteria. The overuse of one mode, we see that a lot. I think somebody hinted to that. Assessment overload, we see that. We're having too much or over assessment. We see that. Insufficient time for students to do the assignment. Too little assignment with the same deadline. We see that quite a lot. These are common problems that we get with assessment. I can keep on listing and listing. Insufficient time for staff to mark the assignments or examination. We see always feedback, this kind of superficial feedback, number 12, provided to students, or no feedback. The wide variation between modules and so forth. And also from the sort of panoramic sense, the lack of programmatic assessment in terms of evaluating. Number 9, someone is saying number 9 resonates with you, Andrea. That's great. I'm so happy that you've seen that. Sorry, let me just disable that. All right, thank you about that. I guess you guys will not see some of that, my mistake. All right, so again, it's important for us to see that. And I think it's clear, and that's bringing back again, one of those issues and concerns that we have is the whole idea of understanding the need for constructive alignment. Again, the word of Biggs and his colleagues in the 90s really pushed that agenda. I mean, we see that reference being made quite often. And there is also the discussion on a common discussion is on validity and reliability. That's a common discussion. And that is also a problem, because if the exam or the assessment does not accurately assess what it was intended to measure, then it's not valid. If it does not, and we see number 1 there was how it well matches or addresses the criteria, which means it's not valid. And the whole idea of reliability, it really talks to how consistent the picture is. I have a little diagram here that seeks to give you a clear understanding of the two terms. You can see here, imagine this as you as an archer. Imagine that you are Robin Hood, and you're Robin Hood, you're number 1, and you're targeting in the middle there, because it means, and by the way, you're not seeing it, but there are 2 circles. There are actually 4 circles right there. So in 4 times, we know that Robin Hood hit the center. That was his goal. His goal was to hit the center, and he met it all the time. Now, the second figure is reliable, because he hit outside of the target. And all the time it was the same. And so we're certainly seeing that. And we are also seeing where it's figure number 3, where all over the place, where you know definitely there are problems with reliability and consistency. But that's not the focus of our session here today. I really want to give more attention to that. So that's reliability and validity is one of those common problems and issues and themes we hear a lot. Another theme that we hear a lot in assessment is the whole idea of more transparent. And I know Will Commence and our colleagues in 2014 begins to really unpack that very nicely. In other words, you get less, and the research is clear, you get less student complaints about not understanding, because you use an approach called transparent assessment design, where you give a clear purpose, you really try and map it to some real world scale beyond the context, you explain the task, and you give the criteria. And in explaining the task, sometimes you give examples and non-examples. And certainly this is one of those things that we want to share and give presence to. So it is clear here that we know that how we design our assignment may also be a problem for some students and some learners. All right. And so there is another thing I know that's quite common, the whole idea of unconscious bias. Anyone wants to, and we see here some terms being, I want to play a short video, but we know that this is a problem. And the research is clear, and this is from learning, the psychology part of learning, which really helps us to focus on that. All right, so I'm going to share my screen. Can you see the monitor? Can you see? You know if you're seeing. All right, we're good to go.
The human brain is an amazing thing. Your conscious mind captures about 50 bits of data every single second. The only problem is, in the same single second, your brain actually receives about 10 million bits of data. So what happens to the rest? Well, it gets processed by our unconscious mind, which makes almost instantaneous decisions about everything around us without us realizing it. And to do that, it uses a whole series of shortcuts and rules of thumb based on our background, culture, environment, and personal experience. Shape with 3 straight sides and 3 angles, right? Now, how many of the triangles that you think you are looking at have got 3 sides? That's right, none of them. In both of those cases, our unconscious brain has jumped to make a link or to fill in a gap. And it's relying on instinct, an intuitive feeling that if it looks right and feels right, it must be right, so go with it, rather than analysis. In evolutionary terms, this instinctive response has helped us survive. The problem is, especially when it comes to tasks that require a rational rather than a life or death response, our unconscious mind is wrong a lot of the time. And research shows that we are at our most susceptible to unconscious bias when we're under time pressure in an area that we feel we are comfortable or knowledgeable in, such as assessing students. Now, we all like to think we're open-minded and objective, but research consistently shows that much of our decision-making is affected by unconscious bias. It affects everyone, regardless of culture, social group, education, age, or experience. Now, I know none of this is news to you. You've heard it all before, right? The problem is just knowing it is not enough to overcome unconscious bias. Research shows that there is consistently a direct link between unconscious bias and the actual decisions we make. We are susceptible to it all of the time. Right now, teachers across the country are being asked to make judgments on the skills, abilities, and knowledge of individual students in order for them to be awarded an exam grade. And we owe it to each and every one of them to do so as objectively as possible, ensuring that the ultimate conclusions we reach are a fair, balanced, and impartial assessment of their abilities, uncoloured by unrelated factors and influences. To do this, we all need to take positive, conscious, active steps to guard against unconscious bias. Before we move on though, let's be clear about one important point. In asking you to take positive action to guard against unconscious bias, we are not suggesting you are unprofessional. We are not suggesting you are unfair or unequal in your treatment of students, and we're not suggesting you are consciously biased. We are simply recognising that we are all human, and hence need to take active and deliberate steps to guard against the dangers of unconscious bias creeping into our assessments. Now, before we think about what steps we can actively take to guard against unconscious bias, let's first quickly identify 5 biases in particular that we should be aware of. Number 1, the halo effect. The halo effect describes a tendency for a positive impression about someone in one area to lead us to draw unduly positive impressions about them in another unrelated area without considering the objective evidence or data. In our assessment of students, this bias could lead us to assess a student more favourably than we should in one area on the basis of good performance or behaviour in a different unrelated area. Number two, the horns effect. The horns effect is the opposite of the halo effect, describing the tendency for a negative impression about someone in one area to lead us to draw unduly negative impressions about them in another unrelated area, without considering the objective evidence or data. This bias could lead us to assess a student more harshly than we should in one area on the basis of poor performance behaviour in a different area. Number three, affinity bias. Also known as similarity bias, affinity bias describes a tendency to view people more positively if their interests, experiences, views or background are similar to ours. In a school setting, this could lead us to view students who we naturally positively engage or connect with more positively than those we don't. Our judgment might also be affected by the degree to which we feel a student fits our own mental image of what a good student looks like. Number four, the contrast effect. The contrast effect happens when our perception of something is distorted by comparison to something else. For instance, in an interview, a strong candidate may appear more capable and experienced than they actually are if they are interviewed after a weaker candidate, simply because of the contrast between the two. In our case, this could lead us to view a student as more or less capable than they actually are, simply because of the students who we have assessed just before them. Number five, confirmation bias. Confirmation bias describes the tendency to draw conclusions about a situation or person based on your own personal desires, beliefs, and prejudices, rather than on unbiased evidence. It's a consequence of failing to guard against all of these biases, plus many others. Confirmation bias tends to unduly focus on and accentuate evidence that supports our conclusions and beliefs, and ignores and downplays evidence that contradict them. We often use confirmation bias to self-justify our unconscious, possibly prejudicial, and likely biased judgments. Again, being susceptible to any of these biases doesn't make you a bad person. It just makes you a person. It just means you're human. But that doesn't mean we just have to accept them. There are things we can do to eliminate or at least minimize their impact. Specifically, there's 4 things we're asking you to do to ensure that unconscious bias does not influence any of our assessments of our students. Number 1, slow down decision making. We know that we are more susceptible to unconscious bias when we make decisions in haste or under pressure. So make sure you are allocating the time and space to perform robust and thorough assessments. Number 2, identify our cultural, organisational and personal norms, expectations and preferences, and ask to what extent they are relevant or might be colouring our assessment. Number 3, reconsider your reading decisions. To ensure objectivity, consistency and fairness for everyone, we need to make sure we keep looping back through the process, re-evaluating and reconsidering our decisions on individual students and the cohort as a whole. Number 4, monitor each other for unconscious biases. Because we're all human, our starting assumption must be that we are susceptible to unconscious bias, and hence we need to support and challenge each other to ensure we are doing all we can to eliminate it and hence ensure a fair process. So that means being willing to be challenged and also happy to challenge those around you.
Okay, so we're going to pause here and we'll put the video, it's just a little bit longer. And certainly we want to be clear here that the unconscious bias does not make you, we all have it. And I think it is clear from the video, from the little video that we really want to make that more intentional, make your thoughts bare by you reflecting on it. Knowing about it is one way, and being honest as well. And we do know that sometimes we unconsciously do things that because from a cultural context, and we see that. So I'm not going to ask you to see which one you're most guilty of, because we're all guilty, but you certainly can see, we can see some of the things that we do or used to do or we should not be doing because of that. And certainly we see that. So that's one problem of assessments that, most persons do not necessarily identify as a problem, but it is certainly a problem. I like what Camille, you said there, in that the unconscious bias is the assumptions we make about students when we are not aware, but which we are reflected in the assignments, etc. All right, so we bring in our biasness, and sometimes we don't even know because our context actually lead us to do that. All right. Another problem that we see quite often is the students' inability to cross boundaries, learning transfer. And that is primarily because, in part, of the disconnect between industry and academia. Sometimes we aim to provide a simple transition. And I know there are some companies will really put down a higher ed and say, okay, I had to retrain the students to do these certain things. So that's an ongoing discussion in terms of the utility of higher education and education on a whole. What are we teaching the students? Are we preparing them for the world of work? And I know the work of your Engström in Finland that really talks about that contradiction and being able to cross those boundaries. And so that's one of those things that we see that's quite popular there. All right, and I certainly think one of the issues that we see is academic integrity, or how do we see it? I know the discussion. No problem, Camille. You can certainly, I certainly think this is one of those things that is perhaps popping up now, but we do know academic integrity is a constant theme and problem for some universities subscribe to a very restrictive, they use Turnitin and different tools. Turnitin, as you know, has an algorithm, all right, and it actually detects text that is elsewhere in different ways. And now we have ChatGPT, it's generative pre-trained transformer, if you please. And it's certainly given us some thoughts to think about in terms of the problems. Or perhaps we can translate those problems into opportunities. I'm trying to think here that we can transfer those problems into opportunities, because many persons see ChatGPT as a problem. Primarily, generative AI has been with us. Many of us use Alexa. I mean, I use Alexa every day, turn on the music, turn on this, tell me what weather's like. And so we do use artificial intelligence, but I think ChatGPT has really scared some educators and persons in higher ed because of the sort of propensities that we're thinking to cheat. And so it's important for us to see that comment there. Steve, thank you for that comment. It's difficult to reduce contrast bias by solving long decisions, but when you have over 250 students in assess in a day. And I do think that that's one of the problems we did mention in assessments and in terms of the size of the classrooms and so forth. So I've been playing with ChatGPT, and I asked ChatGPT, there are two things I like. Write a song or lyric on the theme tomatoes and love. I love tomatoes so much. And it spit it out this for me. Red and round on the vine, tomatoes, you are taste divine, you are taste divine. In the garden, in the sun, growing strong, you are second to none. Can you imagine that? Love and tomatoes, they will grow side by side. In my heart, they both reside. Sweet and tangy, just the love. Tomatoes, you are the gift from above. All right. And so we recognize that. All right, so it is certainly important for us to see that ChatGPT can actually be creative in terms of giving us some solutions. If you had given students to write a poem on that, they could easily have generated that in ChatGPT. So I think one of the key things is really inviting us, the solutions, we're going to be able to explore some of those solutions. And I think this is where we find additional reference, additional motivation, additional utility in the use of alternative and authentic assessments, because it gives us opportunity for students to deepen their creative thinking and so forth. All right, so Camille, you're saying you're hearing, that's very good, very good. I actually asked ChatGPT, explain why I would use authentic assessments in higher education, and it actually gave me suggestions here. So you can certainly use it as a generative, but one of the things that thank you, Andrea, it was nice having you. One of the things that we certainly want to take note of is the fact checking and whether or not you think this is right in terms of where we're going. So I think one of the key things we see here is that ChatGPT is not going to go before. So I'm seeing a note here from Lynette. Before these computer-based forms of cheating, there were students having friends and relatives write their take-home assessment. So ChatGPT is as an extension of that. Thank you, Lynette. Same problem, but just a new tool, And that new tool makes it even much easier to do that. And certainly we recognize that. So thank you for that, Lynette. And so we see that. I mean, we see the case where a professor actually catches a student cheating with ChatGPT. We see ChatGPT actually completing an entire exam and passing, MBA program. And so the whole idea that we need to do is to learn how to use these tools. And I'm focusing on this because I don't know it's topical now. And our previous Nancy Gleason, she spoke at our last UWI Guardian, and she says that if universities want to stay true to their missions of equity, inclusion, and access, then we need to keep and develop those alternative assessments. And so she really challenges us. The task now is to design assessments that incorporates AI-generated text, not least upon graduation. Your students will be using the technology in the workplace, and we are seeing them using it in the workplace now. So I think one of those things, you can see that divide between workplace and academia. We see that coming in very nicely here. All right. And certainly we recognize that, yeah. All right, thank you for that, Simon. Some professor submitted a paper written by ChatGPT. It was, it was published. That's scary. That is really, really scary. Really, really scary, Simon. So thank you for sharing that. And as you know, we certainly see some of those things coming up. All right, so I want also to challenge us here at UWI. I think one of the problems we have with assessment is how well our students actually meet this ideal UWI graduate. Let's be true. And it's certainly one of those things we challenge ourselves. How well, that's an issue. Let's face it. How well do we really produce the UWI ideal UWI candidate? It's a challenge. And I think our mission, our true goal, and the whole idea of transforming community, these are sometimes just really on paper, but in reality, how do we look at our program and our courses to ensure that we allow students to do that? And so there are a number of things we do in the whole process. And I think in part, and what I want to do here is really dovetail in the whole idea of success. I don't want to necessarily see you thinking that it has to be a dichotomy between failure and success, because certainly when we use we use the equation of inclusion, there is also the multiple means of way students can be successful, and how do we really push them? Doing that. It's not all about assessment. It's also about understanding human behavior. It's also about making your courses or designing your courses a learning design that yields a greater return on your effort. It's understanding human behavior and perhaps sometimes how students feel about themselves. It's a little bit more than that. And so how you design your assignment can be seen from different ways. And many times we focus on one form of success because that's how we've been trained traditionally. But we do know that there are different references to how we are actually designing it. Is it non-reference? Are we encouraging our students to compete against others in the classroom? Are we encouraging them to really focus on their internal goals and advance themselves from a personal learning goal? Are we focusing a lot on the standards or the criteria rather than saying, okay, the test itself? Or are we focusing on a wider industry and the standard base? So it's important for us to see success in a very meaningful way. We're going to take a pause. because I want for us to interact in this. I really want for us to see how we can share some perspectives from you know, why is it what are some of the things that from a student side, why students fail or they're not successful, from the faculty side, from the institution side, we certainly want to do that. So we want to go at this Google, this in the chat, you will see that link. So I don't know if one of my colleagues can put that link in the chat, and I'm going to invite you to open that in a while. So is it there? It's not there yet. I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing it. Okay, I'll put it there. Okay, it's in the chat. It's in the chat. All right, so if you can follow this link and
Okay, where exactly are we? Okay, okay, all right, that's all.
thank you. I'm not seeing anyone there as yet, but certainly 3 categories explain why you think students fail. Try to offer one in each category, and each line will be a different person. Each row will be a different person's. And it's interesting to see the different comments that you share. I'm seeing 3 persons in. Can we get more persons to come in? There are at least 22 of us here, so we can certainly do that. Let's get those. Let's get those coming in. Get those coming in. Very good. Okay, I'm seeing here we have just about half of us here in this. So certainly we see most person says anxiety, they don't want to read the questions. So on the student side, lack of preparation, for monitoring. I'll give you 2 more minutes on this, 2 more minutes. I want you to reflect on that. Why you think students fail? Try to cover in each category, right? Why do you think students fail? Thirty seconds. 13 seconds. Okay, if you look at these, you'd realize, and perhaps this will affirm or debunk, it's usually easier, although we have students on the left, it's usually easier to always put the load of failure on the students. It's easier. Lack of preparation. You see that lack of preparation is a recurrent one. They don't understand the questions, to have too many assignments to do, personal or mental health problems. That's certainly one that we've seen recurring. Lecturers don't understand them or their pressures and their needs. So we're seeing those narratives coming in there. Anxiety. In terms of the faculty end, we are seeing lack of preparation. The questions are vague, inappropriate assignments, fear of technology, outdated, do not make the assignments clear. So we're seeing that use of rubrics. I like that reference to rubrics, very good. Unaware of any issues with students, assessment not aligned to learning outcomes, and stuck in old ways. And I think poor monitoring or no monitoring at all of evaluation of submitted assignments, or even from how the programs are doing from a programming standpoint, misalignment between the wider policy and so forth. So it is clear that by looking at this, we can certainly agree that that there are additional ways that we see ourselves being located, our students, but we recognize this. I'll try and cover some of this very quickly, but we do see here that the whole idea of readiness, we saw that they're coming out. The whole idea of readiness, we saw that coming out. Support services, you know, and the support services is hinted there. We saw the counseling mentioned, hinted there, learning constraints and making sense of the assignment. So, I mean, this is really supported by research, and it is clear there from a student standpoint that when we speak of student readiness as a key part of student success, many of our students feel unready. And especially we notice when they pivoted from the emergency remote teaching to the online, I don't know if you agree, but many of them were not ready. That sense of readiness was not there. It was an alienated experience for them, and there are many reasons, but we do know the sign of the concept of readiness there is an important one. And I want to share from the faculty standpoint, I really like the idea that many of us looked at from the faculty end and reflecting. The approach to your teaching, perhaps it's outdated or old, same old things, you mentioned that. But in terms of your approach, can we do things differently? Because our students do come with different environment and different contexts, different time, sociocultural settings, and so forth. And so if we are thinking of a cookie cutter model that we could apply to all students, that certainly is a concern and problem. And so this is where the universal design for learning comes in. And I know a colleague asked, I know my colleague posted in the chat in terms of learning styles theory. I think it was placed in the chat, but certainly that's one of the things we want to focus on. It's about creating the avenue for multiple paths within the course and teaching and learning environment. It's not about thinking that, okay, I'm focusing on this type of learner and so forth. All right, so it's important for us to see that. So the whole idea of communicating your expectations is clear, that we need to communicate the expectations. In particular, some persons may say, I include a rubric, but are your students clear on the rubric? All right, are they clear about that? And in terms of the level of transparency, we saw the whole idea of transparent assessment design. We can certainly see that a lot of persons don't explicate their assignment because they maybe don't want to give the student too much and want them to be creative thinkers and so forth. But the research is clear that transparent assessment design framework helps some students, and a large majority of them appreciate the front-facing assignment in terms of that, because it really allows them to really think about those things. I like this article from Faculty Focus, which focuses on the decreasing failure rates. I mean, the failure rates there is verified. It's something that not necessarily focus on failure, but I think the whole aspects we want to look at here is looking at various ways we can answer the teaching professor in 2011, and they reprinted it actually in 2020 because it became much more relevant. So the whole aspect of Socratic learning, allowing your students to ask, you ask questions rather than telling them, the sort of instructionist paradigm. Many of us say we are constructivists, but yet we do a lot of telling with a lot of saying and so forth. So those things that we certainly, ungraded assignments. I know Lynette mentioned earlier, some students are not motivated, they don't get a grade, but increase your grading over time. You should make that intentional aspect about them wanting to increase their self-efficacy in terms of, how they do it, self-regulation. Give them practice exams. One of the key things here, note, I was surprised that class note summaries, that became one of those major strategies here. So certainly we can see that. And so forth, we can certainly do that. Thank you for that, Camille. that the rubric certainly can be and should be aligned beforehand and allow questions for clarity from students. I really love that. And that means that you are concerned about the student's success, because you really wanted to understand how they will be assessed in the class. And that's a very important thing. I'm really happy that you're sharing this. Really happy that you're sharing this, Camille. Appreciate that. And so the full article, I'll put it in the chat, and you can certainly I'll put it in the chat. The full, oh, it's there already. I was told it's there already. Thank you. All right, so okay, these are really great, but realistically, for persons who do not think things require a cadre of teaching assistants or aides, and I think one of the problems we look at is the student-teaching ratio, and we definitely recognize that. And if we don't have that support, and I think this is where, Joanne, I really appreciate this question, because this is where we say from the institutional side, because necessarily teachers, you're doing your part, the students are doing their part. From the institutional side, from the policy, from the practice, in terms of supporting you in what you're doing, that is also an important aspect. And you're so correct in terms of decreasing failure rates. We certainly want to see that in terms of the support in the mediating artifacts and another person within the classroom. Joanne, thank you so much for sharing that. I really appreciate that. And just as we are an institution standpoint, we certainly recognize support, Joanne. So you see, whatever you're discussing is actually on the slides, Joanne, because we need support for faculty. We need support, and it's such a wide area, but that certainly is an area that we know can be dealt with, in so many different ways. And so it's important for us to see that. There's also the question of quality assurance, and that's certainly a very wide thing. So we're going to take up what is called a water break. We're going to take a water break now, and I want you to take a stretch. You take a stretch, whether it's your hand up or you've been sitting for a while. So I really want you to take a stretch or take a bathroom break. We're going to take a 5 minutes, and you're going to get that rest right now. All right, so we want to do that. The next time you hear me, okay, I don't know if you heard me a while ago, but we'll be back in 5 minutes time. We're taking a little rest, and so we'll see you in 5 minutes time.
Anyone hearing?
Thank you for that. We're back. And so thank you for that, Cadis. I certainly also enjoyed the 50 ways you shared on taking a break, and we shared that. And because it's important, pausing is important. And we often sometimes go full speed without any pause, and that pause is certainly important. We know, for example, Sean's idea of reflecting in practice and reflecting on practice. That's an important part of our teaching excellence, and so we certainly welcome that in your framework, in your doing that. I want to really now pivot to our focus on the whole idea of alternative assessments. And when we do, like many of our students, we really want to think of what is this thing. Oftentimes we see the word alternative. Welcome, Michelle. I just saw Michelle from our colleague from Mona campus. Welcome for joining. And so the whole idea of alternative there is alternative, usually alternative to paper and pencil, alternative to traditional. And so we recognize that something may be alternative, but not necessarily authentic. It's clear for us to see that. And sometimes we see the more innovative approaches will not necessarily be authentic itself. And so it's important for us to draw those references. Oftentimes we use the word interchangeably, alternative paper to pencil, and certainly that's one of those we can see from there. The number of articles and so forth, we'll put them in the chat in terms of kind of understanding alternative assessment. But I really like to look at the characteristics. What makes an assessment authentic? You know, we can simply look at it from the you know, what are some of the characteristics of it? We know that from research that it fosters autonomous learning. It really deepens student commitment towards the advancing their learning process and so forth. It really allows students and learners to really think about how they perform. All right. It asks students to perform, to create, to produce, and to do something. It really is about tasks that are represented meaningful in so many different ways. And one of the things we know about, and some persons see that as a really a disadvantage, is the complexity in terms of really evaluating it in terms of having multiple answers and so forth. And let's face it, in the real world, we do have multiple answers. And it really taps into the higher order, and you can see problem thinking there. And again, I mentioned earlier on that it really deepens autonomous and metacognitive thinking here. And sometimes we can see that. Gloria, sometimes the lecturer is talking with an accent, challenging to understand them is a speed that is too fast. Let me know. Am I going too fast, Gloria? Let me know. Am I going too fast? I don't know. I hope I'm not going too fast. But certainly we see that as a thing here. And one of the things that we want to do is to perhaps compare the traditional with the authentic. I mentioned some of that already in terms of requiring the sort of singleness or narrowness in our answers. In authentic assessment, it's about the performance, and usually there are so many areas for us to focus on. All right, and one of the things is that we see that in a traditional assessment, they are disconnected from real world context in many times and constraints, and oftentimes we see that. We know that they're easily scored, and we also know most of the time students are given one attempt. You have to do it. If you do this high stakes test, you have to pass or fail. But authentic really looks at how students master, and so it's about really more competency based, how well they're doing, how well they can do, how well they can, and so forth. And you provide a score. But usually for authentic assessment, you really want to show an idea of how students' skills and knowledge. So you can see one of the contention that we definitely recognize are the advantages, and it certainly offers us the opportunity to apply knowledge to real life situation to solve practical problems. Isn't that part of our ideal UWI candidate? Effective methods of evaluating students' problem skills, we see that. We also see it really allows them to think outside the box. It really allows them to really operationalize their thinking out of, let's take out of the comfort zone and really try and solve these situations. It's not a paper pencil test. It's not something that we are expecting you to go and copy and paste. And so you are being tasked to make it more personalized. And so this is something that we can certainly look at. It addresses the employability in terms of students being able to transfer knowledge. We recognize that. And it really closes the loop in learning. So certainly we see that as an important aspect of the authentic. And we already identified that it's time consuming, difficult to develop and grade. It's let's be honest, it's sometimes because many of us have to shift from the traditional mode, and now it certainly gives us that challenge. Interpreting the results is also from that sense also difficult to, and one of the key things here, one of the reasons why we're doing this is to create awareness, because many persons and many assessors are really not familiar. If you're in a particular paradigm, there are many, for example, in engineering, we do know that they factor a lot of hands-on competency base, and within education, we have the teaching practicum. So there's that combination of the traditional and the authentic that can work. It's not another either or. So this is not a discussion of either on, it's an either of, trying to blend it to ensure that we are able to allow our students to cross the boundaries. All right. And so forth. All right. So I also want to mention here that it's often about looking at the competency-based framework. And if we really mirror this or superimpose this over Biggs instruction, assessment, and learning, is that if you have instruction and it's not authentic, but the assessment is authentic, then we have issues here. So what we are stating here from the work of Golkheimers and his colleague, the 5 dimensions model that focuses on we need authentic assessment, but it's fueled by authentic instruction, and it will impact their learning experience to be authentic. I like this here. I don't know if you can see this clearly, but certainly it invites us to look at the relationship between authentic instruction, leading towards authentic assessment, that relationship, and leads towards authentic learning. In the end, our focus is to ensure that there is student success. So you can see the relationship here being clear. Okay, Camilla, I can see not seeing it clearly, so I will put the link of that. Actually, that link is, I'll perhaps go on to the next slide and I'll give you the link of that. I'll put the link here in the chat for you, so you can actually pull down this article. I'll do this in a while. You can put this off. All right, so you can follow that article. Thanks, Mark. And that article has reference to that diagram. And the 5 dimensions framework is certainly based on work that was done in the early 2000s, and we saw it leaning towards the kind of validating the work that Biggs and his colleagues, but from a competency-based standpoint, in terms of looking at it from that. So research showed that the task, and so there are 5 areas in terms of our degree, and many times we often think that it's often authentic or not. So we may ask ourselves the degree to which you want to replicate a level of authentic. And so sometimes in our language of assessment, we use the word fidelity. How close does it resemble the real world task? And so that's important. That's certainly important. So if it's a focus on the task, you can certainly do that. It could be a focus on the physical context. You can place the students within the actual physical context. So this is where the in-service, we do apprenticeships, we do different things. You may ask them to interview persons within those contexts, and so that it kind of brings in that social context in the classroom. And certainly you can use the criteria based on industry standards. So I really like this framework because it really invites us to see it from that standpoint. You may not be able to see this in full, but it certainly invites us to see it from that multiple perspective. And so one of the things and tools that you can use is that how can I, as a facilitator, deepen my commitment to authentic instruction and assessment would be to perhaps look at some of these various areas. It's important for us to see that because we want our students to be successful, not just in the course, but be able to transfer learning in a different context. Again, the task there, the task has to be done, one that involves students in carrying out the activities that reflect what is done in the professional setting, in the professional practice. It has to do with what you do in that setting. And again, the physical context, the real place of work, obviously is different from institutional settings. So the assessment should mirror the way in which knowledge, skills, and attitude are used in a real world context. So, and where you have to do it. So oftentimes the simulation, putting students in hospitals and certainly in those real contexts. And we see social work where you put persons within different world social context setting. That makes it quite an important. It's also part of the social context, which looks at authentic assessment that involves them to involve themselves in the social process, equivalent to those in the real life situation. So you may want to simulate that, and this may not necessarily include teamwork, but it may definitely include teamwork or collaboration, because obviously recognize that this is part of our ideal UWI candidate, but it also is part of what they would do in real world. And let's face it, let's working together in a team is an important attribute that sometimes we put it in group work, but certainly we want to ensure that. I noticed that Camille made reference to, in terms of rubric earlier, we want to make sure that when you're doing these different things, you find some way to massage it within your rubric to ensure that those different contexts are actually brought into the learning situation. When we say assessment form, the assessment form is the result. Do you present in that kind of way? It has to involve the product of performance, a demonstration of competence in an array of tasks. And so how is it presented? And, you know, from this, what comes out of it? Do they take a next step where they will actually follow through? If in a real world setting, would they have required to redo, or would they need to contact different persons? So it's what your results actually allows them to do, the way in which they assess in real world settings. You can certainly do that. And again, the criteria and standards is that you're using the same standards to evaluate and judge them. So we see here it's important for us to look at our knowledge, skills, and attitude. Competency-based framework is perhaps something that we can value, although many of our programs may not necessarily be. So we can marry a little bit of those authentic aspects within our teaching and learning, which really push to authentic assessment in a very meaningful way. All right. I'm seeing a question here that's asking thing. What do you say? That's highlighted. What do you say about the student success and the link between authentic success? Share the relationship in a statements in the chat. So that's been asked. What do you say about the student success and the link to authentic assessment relationship? Share a link in the chat, or we can maybe take a pause and hear you on that. That'd be great if I can hear some of you on that. All right, again, to be competent would mean that you can perform, you can organize, you can respond and react, you can fulfill the role, you can transfer. And I think the real end we made here is in a very meaningful way, being able to transfer in those workplace settings. Because we do know from our competency-based assessment framework, similarly, it's judged by assessors as competent or not competent. You know, so what our rating scales and so forth, in terms of the evidence, the decision is based on what is seen. And so we certainly see from those elements there. We certainly see from those elements here. All right, and one of the things we see here are examples of authentic assessment. We have portfolios, In the chat, you can actually put some more that you use: projects, budgets, debate, a panel. We see a plan of action, collaborating with tests, interviews, and so forth. And just sharing some examples. Cross faculty, for example, in nursing, you can provide case study of a patient and ask students to assess and create plan of care, because obviously that's something that they have to do for business. You do a business plan. Rather than doing an essay, you actually ask them to actually do a business plan for real. Sometimes going out there and having those relationships with companies and saying, okay, fine, I want my students to provide a clinic, and they're going to create a business plan or based on that. Computer science, you can troubleshoot a piece of code and develop a website to solve. I know that's done. I know we have persons here from engineering. I don't know if we have anybody from computer engineering, but certainly that's done. And I can attest to that. So certainly we see some of those right here. History. Now we see history, the example where engage in role play. This crime might have happened. I guess the idea of bringing the history there is an important there for that. Yeah. I see Cadis. Cadis, thank you so much. I'm learning so much from you, from your interaction. And so certainly we see some of that coming through. Think about it. Let's think about it. Share some of your innovative, share some of your your authentic assessment practices that you use with your peers. We'll highlight some of them. So if you can share that, I like that one. So I'll share that. And Cadis is saying I was recently invited to lunch by a past student, and it was held at a restaurant that he owns. Thank you. He told me he still remembers the case study I assigned to him 20 years ago. So Cadis, it gives relevance to using case studies and so forth. It has re-energized your passion. So certainly anybody wants to share, I don't know what additional things you want to share. If you want to, Joanne, you can go ahead and use your mic and share that.
Hi, Dr. Hill. Excellent session. I'm really pleased with what you have offered. I'm coming from the School of Education, so we do a lot of work on the same topic with our teachers in the programs that we do. But I wanted to ask your opinion on something. One of the problems with authentic assessments is the subjectivity in marking. And how does that, how does one use it? How is it compatible with evaluation, where a certain amount of objectivity and explanation from the marker is necessary to justify grades and certification and that kind of thing? I mean, the focus is always on authentic assessment, right? But how we evaluate in the end, we give grades, we give to certify. What is your opinion on that? I mean, I know you can't. It probably is it's something that we struggle with as well at the School of Education. But I wanted to know what your take might be on it. So
you're asking. I just want to rephrase the question. So I trying to see if I get it. You're saying that the sort of subjectivity within the authentic assessment criteria, is that what you're asking?
Well, authentic. I mean, assessment is for learning, right? We know that it's about for learning. It sounds all great about getting people ready for the workplace and that kind of thing. But at the university setting or in any educational setting, we're really certifying, evaluating, judging students, and that requires, and that could lead to a big issue sometimes when students ask, but how did I get this grade and my friend didn't, or another peer didn't? And it becomes a problem for the evaluator then. I'm making the distinction between evaluation and assessment.
Yeah.
So why we talk about a lot about authentic assessments, but what does it mean in terms of evaluation for authentic evaluation?
And I think you're now jumping to the transfer. How are they certified or not? And that's what I'm getting in terms of the certification, because based on what you give, I think one, in my opinion, Joanne, I think it's a multiple prong approach. I think mixing the traditional, in other words, I think having the foundational aspects, obviously being rated using our traditional and different ways, but I certainly think having more industry-based approaches, and I do know that's where a lot of persons focus on pass or fail. So you wouldn't get that strong emphasis on, you you really focus on either they're competent or not. Because let's face it, when a surgeon is cutting you, they may have gotten, if they're supposed to have done it for 70% pass rate, you don't know. You just know that they're competent or not. And I think that's where it becomes meaningful, where you can actually have a way of allowing them to see the example or the evidence of whether or not they are competent or not. So, and I think this is where, in many instances, they have more than one person viewing the learners, which I say is very time consuming. So you may have different rounds. And this is what we do in teaching practicum. We allow different clinical supervision in different sessions, and we can see them multiple attempts in doing that. And I think if I am to use the example of certification, I'm certifying a teacher. I want to see them, yes, the traditional point, but I really want to see them based on what is done in the classroom. And I do not just do that once, I do it multiple times. And so we can see the kind of authentic aspect that you are going there, you're seeing them, what they're doing, you're rating them, you're giving them feedback. That is time consuming. I also think we may want to think, Joanne, about the ratio in terms of the weighting, how much weighting we give to the authentic aspects. And so that tells a story about it, because suppose you're giving the authentic component 10%. And this is something that certifies them, then this certainly tells a story about the value. I don't know if that helps, Joanne, but certainly that's my opinion in it from that standpoint.
Thank you for your response, Dr. Hill. I know, I mean, it's a hard question to answer, and it's one we struggle with at the School of Education all the time as well. And it's just refreshing to hear a different perspective. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And I see my colleague, Michelle, is sharing one example of, I currently have my COTL 5103 students, collaborative with a technology toolkit for Mona faculty. This is great. This is great. So really getting them to work with their colleagues. I'm showing here, Carmel, in terms of authentic assessments, any assessment, multiple choice essays must reflect student learning along. And one of the things, Carmel, some persons do is that even though students get the multiple choice item correct, you may have a component that actually has a requirement for them to explain how would they do that in a particular context or scenario. So you could actually use the multiple choice, but have a different part of the multiple choice that actually asks them to explain the answer and response, and sometimes persons use narrative case studies, and it allows students to go back and forth and really see how they responded to that. So that certainly is an important aspect. All right, we see here, Camille, okay, more than if, okay, so it's a continuation of your discussion. Lynette is saying history assignment regarding authentic assessment. They have students document an oral history by interviewing an elder in their community or community who lived through a historic period being studied. And that is so meaningful because we really want history comes alive, Lynette. And I'm sure that must be, Lynette, you want to share? Take the mic and share how do your students feel about that when they do it? Anything you want to share about that?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Oftentimes the students are quite surprised by what they learn because they take their elders for granted. Because sometimes the person they interview is somebody right in their own home, a grandparent, someone who they're very, very accustomed to, may have even lived with their entire lives, but never appreciated this person as somebody who can give them insights and give them something valuable in terms of their academic learning. So it's usually the kind of activity that brings that kind of understanding and appreciation for community, which is, I suppose, a secondary benefit, because it's not the primary thing that we're looking for, but it is definitely a secondary benefit. Similarly, we did a similar exercise where students had to visit museums, and not just the large formal museums, but the community museums. And many of them were quite surprised to find that in their physical environment, you know, in their town, in their village, that they actually did have these repositories. So it actually gives students a greater appreciation for their lived reality when they do these types of assignments.
Thank you, Lynette. I really appreciate that sharing. It really gives perspective to the degree, because while we use traditional methods, we could actually have them really think about real life situations where history can come alive and make it more meaningful for them and more engaging at the same time. Because obviously, let's face it, students really want, there's additional degree of engagement that's being requested because of so many different things. All right, so we certainly mentioned, I have a will here. I don't know how well you will be able to see everything in it, but this is a will that's certification of academic from United Emirates, and I'm not too sure if you're seeing everything there, but certainly it gives us an idea, and it's mapped very nicely against Bloom's taxonomy, cognitive domain. You see that, but it certainly gives you example. We will put the link of this in the chat. By the way, we will share the slides with you. All who registered for this session, you will certainly get a copy of the slides as well, all right, following the session. But we see some examples being used here because we certainly want them to be able to map them. All right, so another aspect we said we will focus on is the whole idea of innovation. And while it is an alternative, it may not necessarily be authentic. And a lot of persons are using mobile means. You have clickers, you have Kahoot, you have all these different things. They're innovative and they're innovative ways of doing. And I know, for example, asking students to do web pages, asking them to do blogs, asking them to do podcast, video interview, and Lynette, you're saying that, but sometimes you may have asked them, okay, how do they present that? Actually, will they present that in an actual recorded video or documentary, actually creating a documentary? And I think this is where the technology actually gives credence to be married and used with the authentic approach. All right, but we want to be clear that not necessarily is something that is using technology, meaning that it is authentic. And I think we have to be very careful here because oftentimes that is usually misconstrued or so innovative means you can use conference as a form of assessment, video assignment, video reflection blogs, group posters, and all these different things. You can film role plays, and you can actually work on live projects with clients, as we hinted previously. And certainly, but we do know when it comes to innovation that the whole aspects of technology actually really forces us to rethink. It really forces us to rethink assessment in a very meaningful way, because the future of assessment certainly is looking at how we can, and this is where I would say I'm not aligned to learning styles theory. I'm more aligned towards universal design for learning, because we see the whole idea of pathways where the traditional will be fixed, but technology, and particularly using artificial intelligence, where you can see where adaptive learning makes sense, where the learner can come within your learning management system. It recognizes the student comes in from a different context, and they can immediately advance at a learning that is personalized. It is something that takes place. And so in other words, the assessment will not be something that is generic. It is something that is personal to the learner, because they would have experienced. Obviously, if it should be mapped to the learning outcomes and learning standards, but in terms of the experience that the person goes through, that is certainly important. We see here in terms of the timing of assessment, more and more the embeddedness of assessment in learning is important. It's not just after, it's more during, it's more as assessment, as learning. And we also see here that feedback is something that should be provided in the real time. And if you design your instruction, if you design your knowledge check, and I do know, for example, many times students look at a video, you can use a number of technology and tools to embed a knowledge check. So immediately they get feedback. They may have looked at 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and then but you can actually use tools, for example, I do know that there are H5P, for example, is one of those things. And we do have an H5P session, which is called HTML5, that allows you to integrate interactions within your learning. It's really real time. And so the students get a feedback before they move through, they have to do a knowledge check. And certainly that is an important aspect of student success, and that you really want to enhance them, allow them to do that. And again, the items will be enhanced based on the experience that they would have gone through. All right. I don't know, any questions, any comment on this? Are you seeing more of this in your teaching and learning? Are you seeing where they are actually going to shape your teaching and learning? Anyone can volunteer? Are they seeing anything, any of these from their teaching and learning changed? I mean, let's think about the last 5 years of your teaching and learning. Those of us who've been in the classroom for many years, are you seeing relevance to any of this? And the difficulty of it obviously is there, but we do know it provides an opportunity for them. And I think if we were to summarize this, is definitely the future of assessment. And in order for students to be successful, implies assessment as personalized, authentic, competency-based, multimodal, multiple pathways, data-driven, because you certainly allow yourself to make sense of the data. And I'm putting here AI-powered because you can use artificial intelligence to support. And I think perhaps we'll need to have a different session on AI and how we can use AI in our planning, in our curriculum design, and how do we use it in our teaching to engage students and so forth. I see that as a session coming up very soon. All right, when we say personalized learning here, we say with advances in technology, assessment can be tailored to individual students' needs in terms of their strengths and weaknesses. I mean, we did a lot of in computer-based, if you look at the historicity of technology use, remember things like, I don't know if you remember this, I remember my son when he was treating him to read, we had Reader Rabbit. I don't know if any of you know that. And so there's that interaction, and he actually answered some questions, and he could have skipped because the way he answered told the program that, hey, let's take him to this level. And so the whole idea of personal experience, from assessment makes it a little bit more exciting, because they won't be bored. They won't be saying, okay, I know this, and you really want to challenge them. Again, being authentic there, mirroring real life situations, and so forth. Competency there has to do with measuring a student's mastery. It's not necessarily has to do with I get 10%. It's really how are they mastering the specific skills and knowledge rather than the ability to memorize and recall. And I think that's important, because more and more we see that would help with the problem with boundary crossing or transferring, because certainly we see some of that coming out quite a lot. And the whole idea of multimodal there speaks to us adopting perhaps the universal design for learning, which I know is a recurrent thing. I know in some academia, they focus on what is called differentiated teaching and different learning. But in the more recent times, there's been a move towards advancing from a universal design. You design it in a way that learners can choose, and learners who are differently abled can certainly do that. We can see it from that standpoint. And AI here is actually being pushed from that they can be used to analyze data. You can use an artificial intelligence to analyze the data to get insight to students' learning, and help educators identify areas in which students are struggling. You don't need to go through your learning management system to see that the AI driven, data driven can actually send you note of those students who are struggling and actually give them some assistance. We're coming to an end. We're going to do a group activity. But before you do that group activity, I want to invite you, and this is where we're going to, because some of you have much experience with designing authentic assessment, and some of you want to share that. And so I wanted to reflect on the 5 dimensions framework. And I'll ask my colleagues to put the link again in the chat, page 70 to 77, the framework. And I really want to invite you to reflect on that. And how do you go about designing alternative assessment? I'm representing our simple 5-step model, but certainly it can vary. You can have some variations across disciplines in terms of how we do that. But we're not going to create a rubric in this group activity, and how you're going to provide feedback. But what we really want to look at is to begin to see how we can apply, and this is where we want you to meet in the groups. I'm gonna work collaboratively. We'll give you 20 minutes for this. Work in small group to design an authentic assessment. First, design on the steps. We just identified some of those steps. You will take to convert a traditional essay, or other form of assessment into perhaps a memo, a presentation, a case study, portfolio, interview, debate, a panel, something that is more authentic, and we can really draw on Lynette's approach as well. And then you design a description. All we're doing is just designing the description and also include a rationale. You don't need to type the rationale, but be able to defend and give a rationale to why you went about designing it the way you did. All right, to include the steps the learners will follow to complete the assignment. All right, I'm gonna say let's exclude the latter part, include the steps, because we certainly don't have much time. I want to invite you to perhaps focus on the first part, design. I'm gonna design the description for the authentic assessment, and then we'll come back. In your group, we're gonna have breakout rooms now. We're gonna do breakout rooms. There are 20 of us, so we're gonna say 5 persons per group, and then we'll take it from there. All right. So what we're doing, we're working collaboratively for 20 minutes. I want to know if it's ready, and certainly it's ready. You should see it popping up. Please select your group, and you can certainly
Meeting is being recorded.
All right, so we recognize that we have very small numbers for the groups, but certainly we can share what you will have been exploring in your group. So we'll do that. If each group can do that for 2 minutes, that would be helpful. All right, and we will. We know that we were supposed to end at 3, so we certainly want to not take too much time beyond that, because we want to commit to our time that we originally planned for. All right. So if you want to share, if it's 1 person from each group, or 2, just feel free from each group to present, share their discussion from the group. We can certainly do that now. So I'm inviting group. I'll start with group, last one, group 4, and then we'll go up. Group 4, then group 3.
We were group 4, right? Okay. Okay, so group 4. Lynette, you want to go, or you want me to talk? Okay. We decided to choose the interview, the last one, right? So let's say if we had a traditional essay that talks about discuss the ethics of using ChatGPT to complete assignments, we turned it now into a format of interviews, debates, or panel for students, right? And the purpose of our purpose or rationale would be for students to understand the implications of using ChatGPT in their schoolwork. So that's the purpose and slash rationale. And in the panel, we organize it like a panel discussion. So the moderator would actually introduce the type of technology, ChatGPT, and describe it, and talk about the implications for using it, the implications it would have for using traditional resources such as the library. And then you would have persons on the panel that give a teacher perspective, a student perspective, and an administrative perspective. So for example, the administrative perspective will talk about things like quality control, and I just kind of, in interest of time, and just kind of being quick. The student perspective would talk about things like producing error-free assignments and time frame. And the teacher perspective, a teacher perspective would look at things like academic integrity and submitting incorrect data. Lynette, I don't know if you want to add anything in terms of the pros and cons.
We figured that for each perspective, you would have 2 persons on the panel, and one would focus on defending or promoting the use of ChatGPT, and the other would take the approach of critiquing it and being against it. And so in that way, the panel would cover understanding the technology and its implications for the stakeholders, the students, the teachers, and the administrators. And so students at the end will come away with an understanding, a sort of 360-degree understanding of the implications of using it in their schoolwork.
Great.
Yeah, and I just want to add, in terms of pros and cons, it would be looking at it in terms of usefulness for completing the actual assignment, as well as with a con, look at things like plagiarism and students not relying on their own metacognition.
Okay. Thank you, Camille. I really think both you and Lynette pulled your head together. It's very short. We know designing these things usually take much more brain power. I like the idea of crowdsourcing ideas. So this is where I really appreciate you sharing that, both of you.
Thank you.
Can you imagine if it was more than 2 of you and 3 or 4 of you that you could have really, yeah. Go ahead, Camille.
No, I think we're done because there are other groups to go.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I want to invite group 3. Group 3.
Sorry, Dr. Hill, could you say who's in group 3?
I think group 3 is Gloria. Who's in group 3, Mark, you remember?
I think that was our group C.
Steve, that's
Yes, okay.
Okay. Okay. It happens to be us, so I've been nominated. So the history, from my background is as a pediatrician in the Faculty of Medical Sciences. So what I'm going to describe is more formative linked with a teaching strategy rather than summative assessment. So traditionally, when we were taught about conditions, we were taught in a lecture format. So a lecturer came and spoke for an hour or so on a particular topic, such as pediatric asthma or epilepsy or whatever. And that changed as time went on to a case, but the case actually involved a whole case from history taking, examination, investigations, and then just asking what the diagnosis is, followed by about a 45-minute lecture as well. So it always ended with a lecture. So what I decided to do, and this started when I was in England, was try to do things a little differently. So I went from that model, and what I did was introduce the case. It's a case study, but the case was broken into parts. So, and then I used the Socratic method. So what I did was give a case, and then I would ask students, it was a small group in the audience, to tell me what their thoughts are. But more importantly, rather than just what they think might be going on, why they thought that was the answer. And if I had added X, Y, or Z to that, how does that then change their outlook as to what the diagnosis or their thought process might be? And then after that, we would go to the next question. And each question subsequently built on some aspect of the diagnostic process, whether it be aspects in the history or the investigations or the examination or the management. And then I would actually follow up with a very brief 1-slide summary of whatever the condition is with a reference, which they all got at the end. And so by doing that, what I know from personal experience is that the great majority of diagnostic errors in medical students and doctors is based on cognitive processing. So if I can get to why they're thinking what they're thinking, then I can steer them from the wrong pathway to the diagnostic process to the correct pathway. And I always forewarn my students that my favorite question is why. So why did you tell me that? What happened? What would have happened if I had added X, Y, or Z, and why? So it gets them thinking and explaining the justification of their answer, like you mentioned earlier. But it's not assessed in any formal way. It's just me trying to get to the bottom of their cognitive processing, so that they go down the right path of the diagnostic process. So
Thank
that's the authentic part, I would think.
Thank you. This is really interesting, and I really like that you invoke the Socratic approach and asking them those probing questions, which kept them thinking. So thank you so much for that, Steve. I don't know if any other persons from your group want to join in, but we certainly.
Well, we both thought that model could be done in other disciplines. For example, even business, breaking down the case. A lot of times we pull a Harvard Business Review case off the internet and we drop it on our students, 30-page, 40-page case. And what I thought, that's what Steve is doing could be done in other disciplines. And there's a lot we can learn from the way medicine is taught locally.
This is really, really exciting, Candice, and the way you are putting it across in terms of us being, I think you're all coming from different disciplines, but you can see how that same approach applies. And I really like that sort of cross-fertilization of ideas from that standpoint. Thank you so much. I don't know if the other group, which is group 2, I don't know, because I saw the group 2 actually wavered a little bit. Anybody from group 2? Anybody from group 2 or group 1? Group 1. But I really just want to just to confirm that designing authentic assessment is certainly a very time-consuming aspect, but it's not impossible. It's time-consuming, but we certainly know the commitment that many of our faculty have towards supporting student success. And I know, that story you gave, Candice, with you sitting at the table with your student, 20 years, it really speaks to the able of transfer. I surmise that the idea that the reason why you have that restaurant is because he was able to apply some of those and transfer some of those strategies or whatever.
It was a food and beverage case study, and I was teaching agribusiness, so I was really proud, and I was shocked that he remembered the name of the case, and it really energized me to continue writing and using cases in the future.
Yeah, great job. It really talks about the utility of that approach. Colleagues, I want to say thanks. I don't want to keep you any longer than needs to be, but I want to share some additional resources with you in the chat. We don't want you to panic. There is a resource that we have. Don't panic. There's a hitchhiker's guide. I'm going to share that with you because obviously the time that we have spent together was just a way to really motivate you, to really energize you. And I really like, Candice, you've energized some of us a little bit more in seeing in that and some of the examples. So the Hitchhiker's Guide to Alternative Assessment, and by the way, there's another version that you have, Hitchhiker's Guide to Assessment, but Alternative Assessment there, quite a number of things from Gordon's work, which is quite a recent compilation of things that he wants to share there. And we also have, I like this website because it gives a clear idea of Muller's, and Muller was one of those who wrote about the dimensions of authenticity within our assessment, and certainly we can see the use of portfolios. He really gave that as a toolbox, which I think works very well. I didn't cover rubrics, but we need a whole session on rubrics. But certainly we see where rubrics are used in that setting. So I want to say thank you. I will send the slides and for all those who attended, we will certainly send the times. I just want to say that there's another tool that we use when you're giving feedback. I know many of you would have deepened your commitment to peer assessment. And so this is one of those models that you can use that is actually tied to the Bloom's taxonomy, the RISE model. And we'll put that in the chat as well. We'll put that link of the RISE model, risemodel.com in the chat, so you can actually see that. That's a way you can get students really thinking. And similarly, I like, Steve, that you use the Socratic approach, but these are questions are asking when you're giving feedback. You can actually encourage your students to do more of that. In the real world, when they're working on a task or a project, they get feedback from their peers. And I think one of the things we need to deepen is our commitment to peer assessment. I know there's a big debate in terms of the weighting and how much emphasis we give to it, but certainly it is something for us to give some emphasis on. And so these are tools that we are sharing. So as you go, some key takeaways. I'll give you 2 minutes for this, and then we will tell you goodbye and we'll say thank you. You know, any key takeaways from the session? What would you do differently? Or how? I mean, I know some of you, this was a refresher in terms of deepening your commitment to alternative ways of assessment. But certainly I want to say thank you for those who took the time out to attend the session. And we certainly want to share those. You can share it in the chat. You can share it in the chat and we'll highlight it. But identify your key takeaways from the session. What would you do differently? We will certainly highlight it here as part of our commitment. We also want you to complete. Let us know, what can we do differently? You know, how did we do? And certainly we see it from there. All right. Steve, Candice says she wants to sit in your class. All right, key takeaways.
I don't do it anymore, Dr. Hill. I've been moved to different, I'm now pediatric coordinator for postgraduate pediatrics, no longer undergraduate.
Oh, no.
But I'm happy to talk to you about how I do it in more detail.
Cool.
Or you can do a presentation for us.
Yeah.
We do have faculty cafe, and faculty cafe is on the 19th. This is an open invitation for any, because this is where many faculty is faculty-led. We provide the environment, we provide the facilities, we provide where you sit around a table and you share 20 minutes on approach or strategy that you're using. And we give you the opportunity to go to at least 3 tables. You do that in an hour, and then we provide a light lunch during the event. On the 19th of April, we'll be doing that in the graduate lunch. It's a face-to-face event, one of our face-to-face events we really want to encourage you to register for. So Kenneth, I said Kevin, but we can certainly invite you, Steve, sorry. You could host a table in our next session, not this one, but perhaps the next one. It would be good if you could host a table how, you know, we are doing that. So Lynette, thank you for that reflection, paying closer attention to assessment throughout the week-to-week teaching and learning processes. I'm seeing that, so thank you so much. Camille, thank you for your reflection there, key takeaway. Group 1, let me just highlight that. Group 1, a group activity was an opportunity to really apply what we've learned into the student, lecturer, and institution from an ecological approach to teaching and learning. I think that's necessary in terms of us making that shift. And so we see that being there. All right, thank you for that. Yes, thank you, Candice. Thank you for that. It was a time for us to really interact, and I really appreciate the time that you spent here. We'll stop the recording, and then we'll remain for us about 1 minute, but then we'll need to exit the session so the recording can be processed. But I want to say thank you for making it out. And again, Mr. Duku has put the link there as part of our commitment. Let's just ensure that we complete that. It's in the chat. Yeah. Yes, Lynette. Can I highlight that? Yes. The topic effectively using, yes. So I'm going to ask my colleague, Mr. Mohammed, using documentary video in the classroom to be an appropriate topic for the faculty cafe. Yes, it is. Sorry for bringing it up in the open, but yes, it is. Lynette, so if we can take up your offer, that'll be good. And the next one will be semester 1, Javed. Well, we have some time. We have some time. All right. Okay. Thank you so much. So we'll turn off the recording, and then we will stay on just a minute or two, those of you who want to ask questions.